The knock came just before dawn, when the mountains still held their breath and the snow lay like a shroud over the pine trees. Eli Carter woke with his hand already reaching for the rifle beside his bed. No one came to his cabin this high in the Rockies, not in winter, not ever. The world had forgotten this place, and Eli had chosen to forget the world in return. Then he heard it again, not a knock this time, but a weak scraping sound, followed by a woman's voice cracking through the cold. "Please, if anyone's there, we'll die out here." Eli had lived alone for 12 years, long enough to believe loneliness was safer than love. He rose slowly, joints stiff from age and solitude, and opened the door. Two women stood on his porch, or rather leaned against it, wrapped in threadbare shawls, their faces pale with exhaustion. One clutched a small bundle of belongings, the other was barely standing, her eyes glassy with fever. Snow clung to their hair and skirts like white ash. Eli stared at them as if they were ghosts. "You shouldn't be here," he said gruffly, though his voice betrayed a tremor. "There's nothing for you in these mountains." The taller woman met his gaze, her eyes dark and desperate but proud. "We don't need much," she said. "Just shelter. Just the night." The other woman swayed, and Eli stepped forward instinctively, catching her before she fell. She was frighteningly light. He hesitated only a moment longer before stepping aside. "Get in," he muttered. "Before the cold finishes what the world started." Inside the cabin, the fire crackled softly, unused to company. Eli helped them to the bench by the hearth, setting water to boil and pulling blankets from a chest he hadn't opened in years. The taller woman introduced herself as Martha, the weaker one was Ruth. Widows, both of them. Their husbands had died in a mining accident the previous spring, crushed beneath stone while the company paid out excuses instead of wages. When winter came early, the town they lived in turned cruel. There was no room for two women without men, no charity left once fear took hold. So they walked, and walked, until their legs gave out at Eli's door. As he listened, Eli kept his eyes on the fire. He had heard enough stories like theirs to last a lifetime. He himself had once believed in building something with another soul. He had married young, full of hope, only to bury his wife and unborn child after a fever tore through the valley. After that, he fled higher into the mountains, building a cabin with his own hands and sealing his heart just as tightly. "I never had a wife," he said suddenly, the words bitter on his tongue. "Not one that lasted. Mountains don't take kindly to happiness." Martha looked at him, surprised. "Then you know what it is to lose," she said quietly. "We're not here to take anything from you. Just a chance to live." The days that followed tested them all. Ruth's fever worsened before it broke, and Eli spent long nights feeding the fire, changing cold cloths on her brow, cursing himself for caring. Martha helped where she could, sweeping the cabin, cooking thin soups from Eli's stores, her movements steady despite the grief she carried. The cabin felt smaller with 3 people, but warmer too, as if the walls themselves had been starved for voices. Trouble came with the thaw. A band of rough men from the lower valley arrived one afternoon, claiming the land Eli lived on was to be cleared for logging. They laughed when Eli stood his ground, and their laughter turned sharp when they saw the women behind him. "Looks like you've got yourself a ready-made family," one sneered. "We could take them off your hands." Eli raised his rifle without thinking, his hands steady despite the fury roaring in his chest. The men backed off, promising they'd return. That night, Eli lay awake, listening to the wind and realizing something he hadn't dared to admit. He was afraid, not of being alone, but of losing them. When the men returned days later, they found the cabin fortified, Eli standing tall with Martha and Ruth beside him, no longer begging, no longer afraid. Word had spread faster than expected. Other settlers from the valley arrived too, unwilling to let lawlessness rule the mountains. The logging men left empty-handed, their threats swallowed by the trees. Spring crept in slowly, but it came. Ruth recovered, her laughter returning first in small bursts, then in full, ringing peals that echoed off the peaks. Martha planted a small garden beside the cabin, her hands in the soil as if grounding herself to life again. Eli watched them both, feeling something thaw inside his own chest. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the mountains gold, Martha sat beside Eli on the porch. "You once said you never had a wife," she said gently. "Maybe that was true then. But people don't stop needing each other just because they're afraid." Eli looked out at the land he'd claimed to escape pain, realizing it had led him back to purpose instead. He nodded slowly. I spent years thinking solitude made me strong, he said. Turns out, it just made me empty. They never spoke of marriage right away. They spoke of planting, of repairs, of building something that could last beyond grief. But the mountains watched as a family formed not from tradition, but from choice, three broken souls who found shelter in one another. By the time another winter came, the cabin stood brighter, stronger, alive with warmth. And Eli Carter, the lonely mountain man who once believed love had no place in his life, learned that sometimes the hardest knocks on the door bring the greatest blessings.